The Raiden Gokaden, which are each in all of the 5 weaponsmithing schools in Inazuma. There was the Amenoma, Ishin, Futsu, Hyakume, and Senju. 4 of these smithing schools had fallen from grace by the time the Balladeer sought its destruction. But in this video, I will mostly talk about the origins of the school that made the aesthetically beautiful sword, the Haran Geppaku Futsu. Before it was only left to a single surviving school, the Raiden Gokaden was quite the cultural symbol of swordsmithing in Inazuma City. According to Inazuman legends, there was once a ronin who knew the process of forging blades that roamed the island nation. By the time he or she mastered this skill, it is said that it was passed down to 5 trusted disciples. These 5 disciples further advanced this process and even made different techniques that have their own secrets. It made each of the disciples' skills unique from one another. Years later, they passed their knowledge to others who were keen to learn their techniques. Soon, this formed into 5 distinct swordsmithing schools that formed the heart and soul of Inazuman weaponry. One such school was the Futsu art. During its 3rd generational existence, the current head, Futsu Minori, was a master of her skill. She was given the task of crafting a sword whose blade was pale blue. Its hamon or edge pattern was as beautiful as rippling water, and one that would often be found at the waist of the Shogun's Valley. In the process, she began by heating and melting a special type of ore that could only be found in the islands of Inazuma. After cooling this metal, she strikes it with her hammer, forming its shape to perfection. Later that day, she gave some finishing touches and finally named the blade Hasui, the wave spike, a weapon described to be as gently beautiful as the ocean at night. When she finally presented it inside Tenshokaku, it was everything that the Raiden Shogun could have imagined. For years, this blade has gained a high reputation due to its sharp edge and elegant design. However, this masterfully crafted and beautiful blade would not last long, as it was broken in half following a duel that decided the fates of the Oni people. Its shards were returned back to the Futsu School for a forging. Unfortunately, the creator, Minori, was now a remnant of her past self. At this time, she was a broken woman who made a habit of drinking due to old wounds. No one knows why she began to drink so much alcohol, but it is possible that she either had a lover that left her or was traumatized after a bloody battle. Because, do take note that Inazuma by this time was still a place full of wars and violence. Still, it's either the Futsu School reforged the broken blade or faced consequences. Sadly, Minori's son, Futsu Hiroyoshi, did not inherit his mother's skills. Instead, it was Futsu Masayoshi, the foster brother of Hiroyoshi, and an adoptive son to Minori, who accepted the task. Masayoshi, also known by another name, Masagomaru, was the one who reforged the weapon and allowed the Futsu School's reputation to re-emerge as one of Inazuma's top smithing schools. Even so, Masagomaru decided to give the reforged blade a new name, a name which will echo throughout its centuries of use, a name called Haran, the rippling upheaval, a weapon described to be as formidable as the driving hurricane. While the 2 Geppaku Futsu blades look very similar to one another, their qualities, however, are vastly different. Because of this achievement from Masagomaru, his mother, Minori, chose him to lead the Futsu School after she passed away. However, Masagomaru refused multiple times, worried that his foster brother might disapprove of their mother's decision. When Minori finally died, Masagomaru taught his mother's forging skills to his foster brother so that he may become independent and strong enough to continue the Futsu School's legacy. After many years of mentoring, Masagomaru decided to leave the Futsu School and travel throughout the nation. From his travels, he visited other smithing schools in the hopes of learning new techniques from them. He did this for many of his remaining years, jumping from one smithing school to another. When he became old and was wary of exploring, he decided to mentor 3 students and pass on to them all of what he learned about smithing. One of these 3 students is a familiar name for us players. These 3 would come to be known as Kaedehara Kagemitsu, Niwa Nagamitsu, and Akame Mitsunaga. Masagomaru taught everything to them, and he did it well. Together they formed a new technique of smithing, one called the Ishin art. Later on, each of these 3 students would soon create the Ishin Sansaku, the 3 great works of the Ishin art. As of now, we have little knowledge about what this Ishin Sansaku is, although it's kind of fitting that Masagomaru's students would create a new form of smithing. In Japanese, Ishin could mean something like single-minded or one mind. It's trying to say that all the smithing techniques that Masagomaru learned from different schools throughout his life is now being remodeled into his students, and thus resulted into a new unified one, or sort of a combination of all techniques. After the 3 students' successes, they would continue passing on the knowledge that Masagomaru taught them. In time, these 3 students would also start their own clans that continues to elevate the bladesmithing reputation of Inazuma. It's quite sad that one of these 3 clans, the Kaedehara clan, could not make it till the end. As for the other 2, Niwa and Akame, were still not sure about their outgoings. To add as a trivia, the Ishin art was actually based on a real smithing school in Japan called the Osafune School. It was founded by Osafune Nagamitsu, who lived in the Bizen province. When Nagamitsu was the head of his family, it was during the time of the Mongol invasions. 30,000 Mongols invaded Japan and gave a major impact to the nation's defenses. Due to this, the shogunate at that time ordered for swords to be made in preparation for a second Mongol invasion. This included the swordsmiths of the Bizen province, who were famous for their exquisite blades with beautiful hamon patterns. Because of this, it contributed to the rapid development of the Osafune school. Interestingly, the names of the 3 students in-game were the actual names of the children of Osafune Nagamitsu and himself. Kagemitsu was actually the name of his son, while Mitsunaga was his grandson. As for the Ishin Sansaku, the term Sansaku came from Sansaku Boshi, which can be translated as Boshi of the 3 great masters. This refers to the 3 great masters of the Bizen Osafune school, Nagamitsu, Kagemitsu, and Sanenaga, who tampered the point of a sword in a very similar manner. It's quite commendable that Hoyoverse placed this as a reference for the story behind the Haran Geppaku Futsu. Now, before we end this video, there is actually a short story about Masagomaru's childhood included in the weapon description, and it also hints at some possible reason why Minori became a broken woman. To start, it is said that Masagomaru was just a dirty, abandoned child who stumbled upon the forge of Minori. Masagomaru was cold, and so he looked for any source of heat. On that evening, Minori was busy crafting a weapon, sweaty and tired. Masagomaru thought that she would send him away, but to his surprise, Minori gave him a bowl of rice. Because Masayoshi was covered in metallic sand, Minori decided to give him the name Masagomaru. From that moment on, he was adopted into the Futsu clan and learned to give up the life of hardship. There's actually one subtle hint here as to why Masagomaru was more skilled in forging than Minori's own biological son, Hiroyoshi. It is because Masagomaru would frequently visit Minori whenever she was working in the forge. From those countless hours of watching her work, it is no doubt that Masagomaru would match Minori's forging skills. If we continue to read the short story, it is said that Minori had experienced something so painful in her past. It is likely related to the wishes of her mother and brother. Maybe there was an argument between their family, and to this day, it hasn't been resolved. This pain that Minori felt seemed to continue even until she was the head of the family. Reading the story, there was one evening where Masagomaru saw Minori crying, possibly due to the old wound. There she was smelling of sake, seemingly trying to ease the pain. When Masagomaru approached her, she offered him one drink, but he refused. Instead, they agreed to keep her emotions a secret, which is quite wholesome if you think of it. However, it's sad to think that Minori had bonded more with Masagomaru than her actual son. When Minori passed away, Masagomaru regretted his decision of not accepting the drink his foster mother offered. A short, but quite wholesome story of Masagomaru's past. Now, this ends my video about the story of the Haran Geppaku Futsu. Thank you very much for watching, And if you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and subscribing. As usual, we're Clementine. Until the next one, be safe and stay tuned.